So my name is Jules Bistrova, and this is the workshop on awakening to our indigeneity and decolonizing as part of the Regenerative Summit, Regenerative Community Summit. And uh, it's interesting because we have had this term decolonizing come up in so many conversations at the summit so far, and it's just getting to be a term that's more and more used, and so people are curious about it, or so I thought it would be really good to have this session to just talk about what does it really mean, and in the planning part of this with Lisa and Jürgen, who I'm going to introduce here in a moment, when we were talking about the title, she said, well, why don't we call it Awakening to Our Indigeneity? Because that's more what it is. And I really like that, but I realize that may not be as clear to some as the term decolonizing, but we're going to get clear. We're going to find out exactly what that means to hopefully this next 2 hours with our wonderful speakers. So essentially, this is about becoming reacquainted with yourself and your own roots and your own indigenous ancestry and the land that you're on. So that's kind of the header title. And now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers and let them begin to share what it is that it means to them. And we're going to get into, first we're going to have some discussion on the importance of connecting to your roots and your decolonizing yourself, your own life. And then we're going to have some experiential practices that both Lisa and Jürgen are going to take us through that give us that firsthand connection to what it means to connect to your own indigeneity. And so I'm going to introduce Lisa first, and I'm going to share her bio that was also up on the workshop for those that didn't get a chance to read it. And then Lisa's going to give us about 10 minutes of who she is and what she's doing with all of this wonderful work. So Lisa is she's a good friend of mine. I'm very honored to really call her my friend, and we met at Standing Rock, and she was a professional psychology professor at the time. She was actually getting ready to leave, but maybe she'll share about that. But she's also a member of the Washoe tribe of Nevada in California, and she has a PhD in counseling and educational psychology. And she was recruited by a Native American professor to New Mexico State University, and she created her own counseling degree program there with coursework on wisdom teachings about health and healing. And her scholarship includes journal articles, chapters, and then a book that came out, I think it was last year or recently, The Indigenous Ways of Knowing and Counseling, Theory, Research, and Practice. So Lisa's deeply committed to the incorporation of indigenous and ancient wisdom teachings in the way we understand how to most effectively assist ourselves and others to reach optimal health and well-being. She, as I mentioned, she since left her academic position to serve her tribe in land stewardship projects, wellness projects, and she continues to hold healing spaces for other people in a variety of ways in their personal reconnection to the earth and their own innate wisdom. And I will mention, by the way, that when I introduced Lisa and Jürgen, I didn't know this, but Jürgen was using her book in his classes. So that's prescient. So Lisa, I would love to give you the floor and tell us more about yourself.
Hunga Maheji. Washo Demotmo Ke Letle Kashanadi Digam Dia Lisa Gray Shield Miangwa Mibi Meatlo Meatlo Dielo, all our relations. Greetings, my name is Lisa Gray Shield, and my mom and dad, Frank and Clinta Gray Shield. My father is a member of the Washoe tribe, and we have a few other tribes within us, kind of from the mix of boarding school. And then my mother is European with a number of different different nationalities. And so I'm the end result of full-blood Indian and non-native person having children. So I grew up my life a half-breed. But I grew up on the reservation, and, so I identified with, my indigeneity, even though we are all indigenous. And that's what I became to understand, is that we're all indigenous. No matter where we come from, we lived in some kind of a small sustainable group. So there is a piece of that heart that I believe runs through each and every one of us. So I'm a member of the Washoe tribe. I'm also a mother. I have 3 daughters, I have 5 grandchildren, and some of my children, part of their lives, they grew up off the reservation when I was teaching at New Mexico State. So they settled in the South. So I spend a lot of my time traveling back to New Mexico to hang out with my children on their land, off grid, at the foot of the Gila Forest, where my grandchildren are being raised without technology, and, as close to the earth as possible, which just warms my heart. I feel like really this next generation, while we are having so many problems and challenges, we do have a paradigm shift taking place. It's important to acknowledge that that is currently underway at so many different levels. And so the mandate, the call to action for us to heal and for us to recognize who we are as Indigenous people, and those are just terminology, but the importance of us recognizing our indigeneity is absolutely critical at this time of, environmental everything. And I'm pretty sure I'm preaching to the choir, that I don't have to convince anybody, at least in this crowd, that, we're all in this together. We have a lot of issues to address together, but the biggest issue that we can address is ourselves, because we are the tool. And so some of the things that I'm going to share with you today with the time that I have is the way that I have, compiled all of my knowledge and research and information and experience into the way that I live my life today. And that journey, the way that I understand the journey that I'm on as I journey through this life, the kinds of things that I'm paying attention to within myself and the relationships that I establish on numerous levels. So those are the kinds of things I want to talk about. And I just want to say thank you for listening to me. And how we doing, Jules? Are we doing good?
Yes, you're doing fantastic.
Okay. And I want to say thank you, Jewel, too, for setting this up and doing the work that you're doing, really keeping these conversations going. The first point of contact is the dialogue. And, a lot of us are talking now. So we have a collective consciousness of people on the ground that really believe that we can make a difference by changing our behavior and by growing within ourselves, so that we can observe the impact that we're having on the earth and possibly impact our future generations in ways that respects the earth. Maybe some of us think it's too late, maybe it's too late, maybe it's not too late. There are things that we can do. There are things that we can do to change the way that we're living. And, we all have different platforms that we talk about these things on, everything from soil regeneration to food sovereignty to environmental stewardship and saving the trees, and the mini Wachoni movement, saving the water, talking about all those elements. And we use the word sacred in there. And to me, sacred just means simple, just down to the most simplest form. So I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint. Um, let's see, here I am. Can everybody see this right here?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I'm not sure how it's actually showing up on the screen, but if this works. So this is a picture of Lake Tahoe, Daoaga, and my people are from the Sierra Nevada mountain range. We lived our winters in the valleys, and we summered up in the tops of the Sierra Nevada mountain range around Lake Tahoe, Daoaga, which is the center of the universe for our people. And this is a symbol of really, all through my academic career, I always look for ways to bring the understanding of health and wellness back to that whole directional model. 7 directions, 4 directions, north, south, east, west, and then above, below, and all around. So with that understanding, it was easy enough to create a conceivable model of how we can monitor ourselves as we journey through this world. So this is a depiction of the 4 directions, the 4 colors, the 4 elementals, north, south, east, west, with a medicine flower in the middle. And the medicine flower speaks of connection to the earth, connection to the sky, Demilosan Gumdanu, all our relatives from the sky, and recognizes that we stand in the center of that. So whatever it is that our God concept is, all of those kinds of spirituality, that all still, this is not separate from any of that understanding. When our understanding and the stories that we tell about ourselves impact us in the way that we believe who we are. Yes, Jewel, how am I doing?
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering. First of all, the slideshow is not in the full screen mode, but also if you were going to do this whole full slideshow, could we do that later after the introduction?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
So are we switching over to jargon
Yeah.
then?
Yeah. We'll just finish up your
Okay,
introduction and just anything else you want to.
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I don't, if there's anything else, I'm just really grateful to be here, and I'm really grateful to get to have this dialogue. It warms my heart that we are talking about these kinds of things. So thank you very much.
I am excited about seeing this whole slideshow. So, but let's introduce Jurgen too, so that we can bring you both together into conversation. And then you're going to have a chance to share this more with us when you do the experiential, right, Lisa?
Yes, that's what
Okay.
that was my plan anyway.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you. Um, yeah, and also just to emphasize what Lisa said, that coming from my perspective as a white woman that really was trying to, like, I got scared when Lisa first told me, "Oh, we're all indigenous." I'm like, "Wait a minute, isn't that like co-opting or, something?" And so uh, when she explained it to me, it meant no, it means that you're reconnecting with your own indigeneity, not you're not taking somebody else's, you're not calling yourself indigenous to land that you aren't indigenous to. It's just the whole earth, right, Lisa?
Right.
So, yeah, okay. Just wanted to clarify that because that was an important point for me. And if it was for me, maybe it was for somebody else here. So, Jurgen, I'm really happy to introduce you. Uh, Jurgen actually teaches at the Santa Rosa JC, where I went to. So, and he received his doctorate in clinical psychology from in Germany, and he settled in San Francisco to teach full time and serve as dean at Saybrook and at the CIIS. His teaching and research interests range from psychology, clinical psychology, research, to the relevance of indigenous knowledge and shamanism for today, as well as ethno-autobiography. For many years now, he has developed conferences and other events for the Society for Indigenous and Ancestral Wisdom and Healing. His research has focused on his ancestral traditions, and he's spent much time visiting with the Sami of the European Arctic. For 4 years, he co-directed with Dr. Appella Colorado, a program for Native American students and others concerned with indigenous roots and origins. He's a consultant for the psychology of the indigenous minds with the Worldwide Indigenous Science Network. Jürgen is widely published, and he's editor of the journal Revision. One of his current projects is the development of a program for Indigenous science and peace studies at the University for Peace in Costa Rica. And I'm really happy you're here, Jürgen, and the floor is yours. Tell us more about you.
Well, thank you so much, Jewel, and thank you, Lisa, for being here. Thanks everybody for coming here. This is so important. I'm so glad we're having these conversations, and everybody in the chat, is acknowledging where they are. So I want to acknowledge that I'm here in Northern California, about an hour north of San Francisco, on unceded land of the Pomo, Wapo, and Miwok people here. And I'm just going to say a little bit about my ancestry, and I'm going to show you in a minute a few slides about it. But I am from Germany, and I actually do speak German. And my ancestry goes, on my mother's side, it goes east, it goes around the Baltic, and it goes to eastern Poland, right on the border, almost to Lithuania, into a shtetl there. From all I know, there's some Jewish ancestries there, and there is also some connections further up north to the Sami people. And on my father's side, it goes into the Alsace-Lorraine and into France, and part of what Jewish people did at those times back then, when the Alsace-Lorraine was the backwater because of the persecution. They changed their identity in those, what were backwaters back there, and became non-Jewish. And you probably know many Kramers who are Jewish. I didn't grow up Jewish. So that's a little bit about my ancestry. And I want to start out maybe by sharing a dream. And it's a dream that I had only 3 days ago. In this dream, I was in a circle. It was a small circle of whatever, 8 or 10 people. In there was a Native American friend and colleague of mine, and she had a staff or a sacred pipe that was used to invite people to speak. And I was eager to speak, but it took a while for me to get my turn. And the minute I touched the staff, what happened was that I just broke out sobbing. I broke out, and just this tremendous pain poured out of me. And it was the pain about the state of our world. It was the pain about the state of our environment. And this grief was just overwhelming in this dream. And really, that's one of the things that motivates me in the work that I'm doing. And maybe two comments here. One is about decolonization, which is really an interesting and important term. And the first thing I want to do is I want to acknowledge there are people who have always lived in a decolonial paradigm, who've done their best to interact as little as possible with the colonial paradigm, which is very difficult given how powerful it is and how seductive and addictive it is. But there are these decolonial spaces, and people are creating more and more decolonial spaces. So then for me, as somebody who is a professor who is teaching, the question is, how do I teach decolonization, or how do I teach in a decolonizing way when I'm with students? And I like to say that I like to twist the minds of my students who've grown up in the standard paradigm and really try to open them up to alternative ways of looking at the world, experiencing the world, and making connections with each other. But it's a tremendous challenge because, as I'm sure you all know, education comes basically out of a colonial paradigm. So, how do I not perpetrate it? And actually at the college, we have started to have amazing discussions about, well, how can we do this? How can we do this better? That's where my passion is. Another passion is I have a daughter who's 16, and I go through these nightmares. What's the world going to be like in 30 years? And I'm encouraged by her passion. I'm encouraged by the passion of the students who come to my classes, who very often are just tremendously relieved about what I offer them. And it's really a shift in perspective when we talk about decolonization, when we talk about indigenous roots. It's really taking off the lenses of the Western worldview. And it's not to trash everything that has happened in the West, but to reconfigure it and to connect it with meaning and values that help us be in balance with everything that's around us. Balance with the earth, balance with plants, animals, balance with our fellow human beings. So that's what's really important to me. And I just want to share a few slides, and then I'll okay, so you should see it here. This is actually also my background image, as you will notice. This is part of my journey, and I've used art, so I actually like showing a little bit of art. And this is at times called the sun horse, or the sun deer, that carries the sun across the sky. It's a most beautiful rock carving in southern Scandinavia. And I want to share a dream. I already told you one dream, so actually it's going to be just one dream here. And this is a photo of the city where I grew up, Hamburg in Germany. But there's actually on the left the entrance to my kindergarten. And I had this amazing dream that guided me in the work that I'm doing now. I want to tell you a little bit more how I got to an impasse. I was starting to teach Native American students. And my colleague asked me, Apila, Colorado, asked me, well, who are you going to be in this program? And of course, I'm male, I'm white. And my challenge, really, the question that I asked myself is, how do I not perpetrate a colonial paradigm any further? How do I really facilitate equitable knowledge exchange among different peoples, different cultural traditions? How can I facilitate a cultural healing? And it really threw me into deep shame and an abyss, because I was going, well, who am I if I let go of this Western academic white identity? What's there? And Apila, Colorado kept telling me, as other Native elders did, that everybody has indigenous roots. So when I talk about indigeneity, I would never say that I'm indigenous, but I would say we all have indigenous roots. And for me, that's an important distinction, because we all come from a place where people lived in a paradigm where they were striving for balance with the world inside and the world outside, and where the connections between self and other was porous, where there was sort of an osmotic exchange. So I went through tremendous cycles of shame. You can imagine, as a German, dealing with ancestry, dealing with the Holocaust, dealing with the Second World War is not easy. But this dream guided me, because in this dream, I was in my kindergarten. I went into the backyard of the kindergarten where there was a playground, and suddenly everything was cordoned off. And there were these yellow strips, no trespassing. And in dreams you can do anything. And in the indigenous world, dreams are very important. So, and in dreams you can do anything. So in the dream, I left my body and went across the yellow strips and saw that there was an archaeological dig going on digging into the roots of my culture. And I woke up with the sentence, "It's all too near, it's all too close," which is actually the name of the suburb where this photo was taken. So I took it as an imperative to violate taboos and to go to what's right underneath my feet, meaning my indigenous roots, and to break taboos and to look at that. So that's what I taught, what the dream taught me. Jewel, can I have 2 more minutes?
Yes, let's wrap
Okay,
this part up. Yeah.
I'll wrap up very quickly here. So in the process, I found a lot of things that pertain to indigenous roots. Here are ancient sculptures, call them, ancestral deities, gods, goddesses, guardian figures. I recreated some of these in my art. Here you see where I was from, and you see actually these rock carvings here. You see in the center, there is what looks like a medicine wheel. There are footprints. There are actually star constellations in there when you look at it. So suddenly I realized there is all this ancient knowledge there. And after this slide, I'll stop so that we can move along. This is actually these 3 staffs that were excavated outside of my hometown. They're from way back when reindeer, which are now with the Sami people up in the north, were roaming there during the Ice Age and thereafter. And this is a place where people made offerings, and the centerpiece is a female spirit, a female deity or goddess, and that's what's there. So I learned in the process that I was lost, but the knowledge is not lost. And I will talk more about the process of how we can work to access that knowledge and make ourselves more complete later on.
Ooh, that was very rich, Jürgen. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to going deeper and with both of you and your rich offerings there with your slides too. So the next part of this discussion is maybe about 20 minutes or so, and then we're going to go into the experiential with Lisa, and she'll share her slides again and lead us into a practice. But this next 20 minutes, let's kind of just dive in, Jürgen and Lisa, of what it means to connect to your roots. There and why is that decolonizing? And in particular, we had come up with a question: what are my grandchildren going to say that they learned from me? What are the stories that those that come a few generations ahead will say about me? And what are the stories that we remember about our grandparents and our ancestors? So I'm going to put those questions in the room, and Lisa, if you want to speak to that first, and both of you just kind of have a conversation about this, why it's so important.
Well, I first want to clarify what it means to be Indigenous. So, it's beyond just being connected to the physical, to the land. That's why it always brings me back to the 4 directions. And I talk about the body, mind, soul, and spirit. There are numerous depictions all over the internet and through so many different organizations that use that holistic model, for their business models or their health and wellness models. But what we're understanding is that, there are more, we need to think beyond, just beyond the physical. We have the cognitive, the spiritual. And so I think the most important thing to understand is why we're here and remember who we are. As beings, as physical beings, we have a symbiotic relationship with nature and the elementals, and there's a circadian rhythm. And when we are at our healthiest, we are working with the seasonal cycles. We're eating the foods that are available to us in these local areas. What does it mean to be well? In today's world, there are a number of constructs that talk about what it means to be well. For me, I had to recognize that at some level, I was completely stressed by trying to live in the Western paradigm and be a professor at a university and, you know, try to maintain a publication agenda. And then I started having grandchildren. And I was reminded that there are natural stages in life, and that when we don't honor those natural stages in life, we begin to lose our balance and our sense of self. Not only our life stages, but also the seasonal cycles in the way that we eat, the way that we think, the way that we express our feelings and our emotions, which are also very indicative of our ability to connect to spirit. I believe that all of the religions that we have across the planet formed as a result of our inability to connect to spirit. We needed a framework. We lost our way. And so our religions were developed to provide us a framework back to spirit. And so those religions are couched in cultural teachings that are very important in our development because they live in our very being. So no matter where it is that we come from or what religious lines that we follow, we need to pay attention to who we are because we're all important here. From an Indigenous perspective, it means that we're stepping into our own highest expression. And when I become myself, and there was a chief that had this quote, I'm trying to think whether it was, I don't think it was Black Elk or another chief that said, when you step into the center of you and I step into the center of me, then we shall be one. Because there's no competition, there's no hierarchical structure or order. We're all equally important in who we are on this planet, whether we're a little child with disabilities where we need to stop and pay attention to and love and nurture and care for and pay attention to the needs of this one, because these are the ones that are saying, hey, slow down, stop creating so much in this world, slow down, pay attention, look at the plants under our feet. You know, we now have scientific evidence to support Indigenous knowledge on so many different levels. So, you know, when I say, you know, for myself, returning to my indigeneity and who I am and being my authentic self, it's a journey. Our existence on this earth is a journey of cleansing and purification and being able to experience this earth star and the beauty that this earth is and preserve its beauty for future generations so that they too can come after us and experience the beautiful, you know, Mother Earth, Decolonizing, you know, this live being that nourishes us, that gives us everything we need to play, to live, to, you know, all of our medicines are in nature. And so when we return to that very basic fundamental knowing and simplicity of life, that, you know, we begin to realize that a lot of this junk that we're creating that's causing so many environmental problems or challenges for us in the world, that all of those things are not necessary. We have enough information to make good choices about how we live and breathe and eat and play and be on the earth today that's healthy and is in, but our society in general is in such a funk because we have, you know, a Western paradigm is a paradigm of competition. And there's so much competition going on in the world. It's a paradigm that values gross national product, right? Money, those kinds of things. And so it's really hard to compete with the distractions that that all of these products have produced. And I think it's absolutely critical that we begin to reconnect with the earth, reconnect with nature, which is what plants do. They assist us with that reconnection. Plants are absolutely critical. When we are not feeling well, we're depressed, we're not happy, we go to the psychologist and we find out, you know, that, you know, we need to take this pill because we get a diagnosis and we get a diagnosis and we have to treat that. From an Indigenous perspective, diagnosis and treatment is simply not deep enough to actually heal. The paradigm is about symptoms and outcomes of those symptoms. So plants and ceremony, returning to our knowing of the earth as being alive. Okay.
Yeah. that was incredible. And I'd like to bring it back to the question too, because you were actually the one that thought of that question. So, and I'm really curious about it. What would your grandchildren say? What would your great grandchildren say about you? And I also like to hear what Jürgen's answer is too. And why is that important to this being Indigenous?
Well, since we brought the question up, I have been thinking about that, and so I'll have to answer it like this. My father and the people in my tribe, which is a very small tribe, have come together. The Washoe people have come together to create Washoe Danuangal, which is the people's house. And the people's house is a gathering place so that we can come together and we can talk and we can pray, we can talk Washoe, we can remember who we are as stewards of the land. And we want the building built in a traditional way so that it reflects the elementals of the land and it provides a presence of Washoe people in our traditional homelands. So when I was thinking about the question, what is it that I want my grandchildren to remember? I had a vision that just brought me to tears. And the vision was that I was standing at Washoe Danuangal that had been constructed. It's a campaign we're working on right now, but it had already happened. Washoe Danuangal is standing there. And my grandson, Ra, who's only 10 years old right now, was standing there with his grandchildren. And he was saying, my great grandfather and all the elders that were around at that time put this building down so that we would remember who we are as Washoe. Washoe means the people, and it's a peaceful people, a people that holds the state of balance within our environment. We're stewards of the land. We're people of the earth. And that remembrance, that's what I want my grandchildren to remember. So I'm working really hard with my father to bring about a presence of Washoe people, traditional people on the land, so that all of us can remember that, you know, we all live here now. So we're all responsible for this. So that's what I would want my grandchildren to remember, is to remember who we are. And, you know, and that's remembering that connection to the land as stewards of the land.
Thank you. And why is remembering, why is this so important for decolonizing, to ask these kinds of questions? And maybe we can hear from Jürgen and then come back if you want to think about that a little bit. But Jürgen, I'd like to hear your answer to the question, and I'm really curious about why this question is so important for the topic of this workshop.
Yeah, let me give it a shot here. The way I look at it is that, you know, in the history of the West, what has happened is that there have been separations, there have been cuts, or, you know, as a psychologist, I talk about there have been dissociations. And so I talk about the, you know, kind of the primal trauma of the West. And that is the separation from all these resources and connections that Lisa has described that are instrumental in balance and healing and well-being and being centered, in understanding who you are and understanding, you know, what your gift or medicine or any of this is, right? So there is this separation, this cutting that has happened. And I'm kind of, you know, the severance is over time traumatic. It's a dissociation. And when people are dissociated, one of the things that can happen is they go into an addictive paradigm. And you know, we talked about the importance of money and profit. You know, I think our Western paradigm is an addictive process. And, you know, whatever we do, it is to fill an empty self. And when settlers came to this continent, they had a choice. Well, they had any number of choices, but, you know, they had the choice to connect with the native peoples, and they didn't. They regarded them as primitive and dismissed their knowledge, basically. And also in the slave trade in the Middle Passage, whatever indigenous thinking came out of Africa was also not a model that was accepted because of the prevailing racism of the time. So why is this so important? Because the most important question that we can all ask, well, how come we're not sitting with our elders in an indigenous way? How come we're not sitting in that circle where there are elders who teach us about balance, who teach us the old stories, who guide us through the ceremonies to find, well, what's my obligation in the world? What's my gift? And, obligation is an important word, because in the West, we are very individualistic, and it's about what I can achieve. In indigenous thinking, as far as I understanding, it is I have an obligation to the world, I have an obligation to manifest my gift. So the question of how come I got separated from all of this is a really important one. And it's an easy question to ask, but it has difficult answers because it leads us to deal with trauma, with shadow material, with family history that maybe, there are some problems in there. But all of that is healing. All of that is healing the severance, healing where we are connected from roots that potentially can nurture us. And I just want to say this is about a quality of being in the world. There's no presumption that everything has always been perfect or that there hasn't been bad stuff happening, in the world before or any of that. But there are qualities and values, that Lisa summarized that I think are absolutely essential for our survival. They're absolutely essential for us to address the challenges that we have. So it's about a way of being in the world. And at times we will fail, at times we will do it better. We'll make mistakes along the way. We can correct the mistakes, but that's what it's about. So when I'll give you one example, final example, and then I'll stop talking. I was standing outside of a gathering of students, and there was a Hawaiian kahuna who was going to talk to the students, and I was standing with him outside. And then he started, as he was entering, he started to make, a number of movements, which were sort of beckoning movements. And then we went inside the building as he was doing this. And he said at that moment, now I can start, all my ancestors are here. So it's not that our ancestors have vanished. We have lost our connection to our ancestors. They are there to help us. They can help us in dreaming. They can help us in ceremony. And so that's part of the healing. That's part of finding completion, standing at the circle that Lisa has described, centering ourselves. And, the dark stuff is inevitable in there, but when we look at the dark stuff, we can heal it, right? We can't heal it when we don't look at it. And so that's what purifications are about, and giveaways and, all kinds of ways that we can deal with that, because that is not just personal healing, but it's also cultural healing. We are in a runaway. We are run away from all these issues. And we do, we deal with symptoms, we do anti-racism, which is of course incredibly important, but racism is just one of the symptoms of an underlying imbalance. I'll stop there. I could go on.
Yeah, oh, you were definitely got a fabulous role there. Really love that about, we've been cut off from our ancestors, and I know in this society, we ship off our old people to separate, and the children off, and the adults go work, and so like there's this separation between generations in this colonized culture, and so the question about what would our grandchildren say about us, and what do we say about our grandparents, our great grandparents, is is remembering to bring that whole connection back. Um, that's my understanding, and that is part of decolonizing, is to remember that we're part of this whole connection. We're part of a lineage. We have roots that that are living in us now. So, Lisa, do you have anything more to? I'm gonna a few more minutes, and then we're gonna move over to your experiential. But do you have anything more to say about this topic?
Yeah, there's a lot to say about it. It's like, I think one thing that came to mind is one thing that we never really talked about as I went through my program as a psychologist was the question or the reality of epistemology, that the way that we live our life is informed by some deep underlying belief systems that are instilled through our through our genetics, through our lineages, through our cultural experiences, through our socialization, all of those kinds of things. And so there's an epistemology that informs the decisions that we make in the world. And so it's critical to kind of examine what are those underlying motivations within us, and does this really align with what I believe about myself? And so, from an Indigenous perspective, that epistemology, it's about community. There's an understanding of like the goals in life. Maslow, for example, one of our psychological theorists, who talked about enlightenment as being at the top of his hierarchy of needs, right? So you're at the top and you're reaching this level of enlightenment. You come into the world, and then you've got to get your needs met, and then you've got to learn how to be in the world, and then you get to reach this level of enlightenment. But Maslow missed a couple of things. First of all, his model came from the Blackfeet reservation. It came from the Blackfeet people, his observation of Blackfeet children and the way they played together. But what he got wrong was he applied a very one-dimensional depiction of a movement through life which is linear in reality. We're striving to become enlightened beings, but his depiction came from the model of a teepee. So it's not a triangle where there's a goal to be reached in life. When you look down from the top of the teepee in the center, where he said it was enlightenment is assumed from birth. We come into this plane as enlightened beings, and then we become socialized into ways that cause all of these divisions. So the highest goal that a person can reach in life from an Indigenous perspective is not enlightenment, as Maslow said. It is cultural propriety. Cultural propriety is our contribution, our perceived and received contribution to our community. What is our impact on that community? And each and every one of us, the underlying belief system is that we all have a beautiful impact, and we all have a gift to give. And when we contribute in a way that brings balance and harmony and happiness into that community, then we're most likely stepping into our own highest expression. When we don't, and our impact is causing problems and causing challenges within our families, and abuse, and abusing even our own body through food addictions, and not paying attention to the kinds of foods that work with our body, which is always the kinds of foods that's good for the earth. And once we start processing those foods, it's hard for the earth to break it down. And believe me, it's hard for our systems and our digestive systems to break it down. It's because we've stepped away from what's natural. I don't know how I jumped from one to the other, but anyway, so cultural propriety is the highest level that somebody can reach, by recognizing that I have a contribution to my community, and I have a responsibility to step into my own highest expression, so that that gifting back to my community is done in a really good way. So that's what I'll say about that.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's about reconnecting to what's essential and inherent in us. Yes, from being born, and that we've gotten divided as we've grown and gotten socialized and colonized, whatever, separated, and we've gotten so extreme that we've separated the generations. We've separated, most people I know don't even know their own roots, don't even know their grandparents or where they came from. A lot of, I know a lot of people like that, and it's not unusual, and a lot of us are mixed from many different places and cultures, and it's hard to know which one to connect to, and so there's a lot of confusion around that, and I'm wondering if I know we need to go into your experiential time. We've got about 20 minutes for you to lead us through this beautiful process you're gonna offer us, Lisa. But maybe just a couple more minutes just to cap this subject off. That's very important. I don't know if either of you want to just say a couple more words.
Well, I think you know, when we look at our roots, you know, we're mixed, and there is confusion. But this confusion can be resolved when we pay attention to, say, our dreams, right? These are questions that we can ask, because you know, it's about a different sense of self, a different sense of being in the world. And you may remember the image that Lisa showed, which gives you a graphic impression of what that is. So if I'm in the Western worldview, you know, I'm kind of lost, and I'm the one who has to struggle to find ancestry, right? But when I'm actually being and praying and you know, making my offerings within an indigenous worldview, then it's a two-way street. The ancestors are there to help us also, right? So if I have a sincerity in my asking, in my prayer, in my putting out the question, well, who am I? Where am I from? What am I here to do? These kinds of questions, then there will eventually be an answer. Now, this answer may come in all kinds of different ways, right? It may come as a dream, or it may come as a big book that falls on your toes, right? I mean, it can come any kind of ways. We need to pay attention to the signs, you know? I mean, I had a woman, she was actually from Nicaragua, and she worked with these questions that, you know, I challenged her to address. And what happened is she called up her grandmother in Nicaragua, and her grandmother, all she said was, I'm going to send you something. And a week later, she got this package, and she opened the package, and in there was a piece of pottery. She picked up the piece of pottery, and memories started to flood into her awareness, because she had actually grown up with Native peoples in Nicaragua and have totally been denied, right? So we never know how these, you know, connections come to us, you know. Oh, somebody is mentioning Sand Talk. Great. Yeah, great book.
Oh, wow. Well, we're going to actually, I think we're going to have a workshop with you, Jürgen, in November on connecting with your ancestors. And so we'll be able to go deeper with that. But,
Yes. Yeah.
but now I'm going to pass it over to you, Lisa, and if, you know, feel free to say any last words on this subject, or you can just take us on into what you're going to share with us for the next 20 minutes. So the floor is yours.
Okay, so this is just a definition that was published in a journal, in the Journal for Social Action in 2011. It's a definition that my students and I came up with about Indigenous ways of knowing, just in trying to present it to the field of study that I am a part of, which is the helping profession, psychology. And so this definition is: Indigenous ways of knowing is a practice that naturally promotes peace, justice, and respect for all life on the planet. IWalk are the collective epistemologies and ontologies of Indigenous people from specific locales that have worked to promote harmony and balance in all directions of their environment: the north, south, east, west, above, below, and all around. IWalk is grounded in multi-logical reasoning, therefore naturally considers all things in all directions in order to make decisions about how to live on the planet with one another and in promotion of love, beauty, and peace for generations to come. I walk essentially equates to the raising of consciousness from a level of cognitive behavior to one that encompasses actions upon the world to sustain it. So there's depictions of 4 directions models for numerous reasons from tribes all over the world. So the 4 directions model is, is not new in indigenous cultures. It provides an understanding of holistic, multivariate dimensionality in life. So we really cannot describe life from one vantage point without the consideration of numerous others. And so when I was teaching in, this is interesting, I don't know why it's looking like this. So 7 directions provided a framework for me to understand how to heal and how to assist others with their healing process as well. So the healing domains are those 4 directions, which are the body, mind, soul, and spirit. And the body, that physical dimension, is what we learn about through medical science, through biological sciences, all of the physical aspects of the way that our body works. And so it is absolutely as important as anything else that we explore the way that we eat, the way that we treat our body, and the way that all of our actions are interacting with the natural cycles of nature. And, it's always a process. It's something that we start, and I started that for myself. And then our mind, our thought processes. If we actually reduce all of life to vibration, the understanding is that the vibrations that underlie the stories that we tell about ourselves and our belief systems and the things that we talk about on a regular basis are the things that we're creating within our life. It's scientifically validated to state that if we're going to talk on a negative plane about negative things, we probably have a lot of negative circumstances coming out of our life. But when we switch that and we talk about happiness and create things in a good way, then we feel a lot better. This is scientific. So it's important that we pay attention to the vibrations of the storylines that we tell, the things that we believe in our mind and our soul. Our soul is where we get stuck. We have such a thing as a soul wound when things happen to us in our childhood, or maybe when we're carrying on a historical or intergenerational kind of pain, or so that soul wounding, those are the kinds of things that we can't really talk about. It's our feelings. Maybe we feel stuck or we are stuck. And this is where we need ceremony to help us break some of that buildup, that repression, the pain that we feel that's in our soul that actually prevents us from living the most authentic and beautiful life that we can live. Those things that get us stuck. Sometimes we need a little bit of help, ceremony, to help us release those kinds of things. And when we do that, we maintain our connection to spirit. So by being disconnected from nature, we're disconnected from spirit, because nature is the mind of God in some ways. We might say that interconnection and interdependence amongst nature and the cycles, the seasonal cycles, and how that rolls has so much to teach us about life. And so the 3 indicators of being well, in counseling, we talk about our relationship with the earth. That would be below. Our relationship with Mother Earth, with the water that we drink, the food that we eat, the fire as a transformative element, as a cleansing element. In Indigenous ceremonies, it always breaks down to earth, fire, water, and air. When you're going in a sweat lodge ceremony, you're crawling on the dirt, you're heating up hot rocks, you're throwing the water on those rocks that are referred to as grandfathers, because they're the oldest beings, and that water is turning into steam and going up to the top of the lodge and creating and coming down and touching each one of us, and all of our prayers are coming together, and we're creating a collective vibration in the direction that we're praying together. So prayer is powerful because it's intention, and intention is powerful. So So our relationship with the earth, our relationship with our understanding of who we are as spirit beings. And for a Washo, you know, it's recognizing that I come from the stars, Demilo Sangum Danu. And I still have relatives up in the stars, and numerous of us have stories that take us back to the stars. And then the center, when it's all around, that's what we call in Washo, we say Wakalet. Wakalet means myself, me. This is who I am, not any more, not any less, just myself, my authentic self, Wakalet. So that's the healing. So healing domains are the body, mind, soul, and spirit. Those are the areas that we work on. And we each determine how to work on those things. And sometimes we need to get a little help with them. And that's where plants and ceremony come in. Indigenous ceremonies work at a level of shifting up the way that we believe about ourselves and the stories that we tell, right? Because I don't think it's a big sell to anybody here to say that belief is powerful. And, you know, we even know from neuroscience that what we believe about a situation has more impact on us than maybe even the true facts of the situation, because the impact that we have is a perceived impact. And so it's really important for us to pay attention to the way that the things that we believe about ourselves, the stories that we tell about ourselves, and that we move those stories in a good direction, and we come together. So the other things, let's go back here. So what I want to bring to mind is I did a research study with a number of colleagues, and we wanted to determine, what does it mean to be healed? If we are healed individuals, what's going on within our communities as healed people? We're always talking about the traumas and the things that cause the problems as in our communities, but what does it mean to be well? And the first thing is that true healing happens at a community level. So we got a lot of work to do. All of us have a lot of work to do, whether we're talking about our local community, our global community, the impact that we're having. You know, we all have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of different ways that we're doing it. Number two is the earth is the source of all food and medicine. So we're beginning to explore avenues to re-engaging our relationship with the earth in how we nourish ourselves and the kinds of medicines that we use. The next one is that water is life. Many Wachoni. Language, culture, and traditions are important. We need to focus on the positive. So we're talking about that vibration, the way the stories that we tell about ourselves. If we are stuck in areas that are bringing negative circumstances into our lives, maybe we need a little help breaking that up. And that's where ceremony comes in. And sometimes if those pains or those soul wounds are so deep, we may need a little more help, you know, a little deeper ceremony or plant medicines or some way to break that up. And we also need to always make sure that we're addressing all areas of our life. Ceremonial practices reconnect us with spirit. And then social and restorative justice responsibility. So I just put a slide in for each one of these. You know, this is a picture of my father and I at a community event by the lake where our people are gathering. And so we know that, you know, maybe one of us feels like we're healed and we're well. Well, we still have a responsibility to come back. You know, I think all of us at some level those of us who grew up in a community, you know, we feel that draw to come back to our community and to give back to the community. The earth is the source of all food and medicine. This was taken at my daughter's wedding, and we were acknowledging the directions, the north, the south, the east, the west, below, above, and all around. So just really recognizing that we are connected. We know that when we walk barefoot on the earth, that's the best way to get minerals into our body. You know, even better, you know, sitting on the beach for a day gives us more minerals than we can take in a pill. Water is life. This is a picture of Da'uaga, Lake Tahoe, taken from the top. Language, culture, and traditions. These are some baskets that some of our tribal members made, and we were catching fish in a traditional way. Focusing on the positive. I put a picture of poppies here because it's such it's a medicine that helps bring oxygen into the brain and makes you feel good. Ceremonial practices reconnect us with spirit. And they're always about remembering those very simple practices. Social and restorative justice responsibility. This is a picture of my daughters protesting a dam that was proposed at the Gila River, where my oldest daughter and my grandchildren live, to stop the Gila River and kind of change the whole trajectory of what was happening in the natural way. So that they were able to stop that. And here's a picture of some ladies from the Amazon that are protesting the trees that are coming down. Oh, I thought I had a few more slides of Standing Rock. I did want to mention that, you know, it is healthy to be taking a stand for all of these environmental issues, and to do that locally is really critical. It was all I could do to stop myself from jumping in the car with Julia to head over to line 3 when she mentioned it to me. Let's go to line 3 and support our relatives who are standing up for their rice fields, their traditional rice fields. But, you know, there's a lot going on right here in my own homelands. You know, my father's fighting with AT&T for putting broadband lines through his property. And now they're getting ready to put another set of broadband lines without his permission, without, in fact, doing it even in spite of his protests. So taking land from Indigenous people is not just a thing of the past, it's happening today still. And so standing up and speaking out on behalf of those things is a sign of being healthy. You know, we're not going to sit complacent. So I'm just going to end the PowerPoint here. Go forth in a good way, which means, you know, this is a prayer referring to the state of your heart as you journey through life. You know, always checking in with our heart as we move through life. It refers to the process of living, not the product of living. So we welcome any questions or comment. You know, there's certainly a lot more to the story and understanding the directions. In fact, when we go into ceremony, we have a song that we sing, you know, where we sing in each one of those directions to ensure that we are recognizing that there are, you know, that there's a multivariate of energies that surround us, and that we are a part of the interaction of those energies. And so we want to be healed, and we want to feel happy, and we want to feel good in the world, and we want to help others feel that way too, so that we can, in a sense, raise the vibration, you know, or assist with that consciousness raising that's happening across the planet. So
Lisa, I was hoping you also, that was amazing. That was incredible. And I'm so glad you took us through that. And I wonder is it a short practice? You were going to take us through the 7 directions of, is that right?
I did not bring my rattle, but yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to take us through a prayer.
Okay.
And even though I didn't bring my rattle, I'm going to go ahead and just sing it. And this is a prayer. I'm not an entertainer. I'm not a singer. But, you know, I've been talking about the 4 directions and the indicators of well-being above, below, and all around. So I'll tell you a brief story, and then I want to sing this song. And as I sing this song, I just want to explain to you that there's every direction is honored in this. And those directions recognize that, you know, we are made up of all these elementals, that we are all connected and we are all related, and that we stand in the center, and that we are responsible for our own creation. We're responsible for our own healing in a lot of ways. So we ask, you know, that we would stay in the center of ourselves, so that when we're present, we're making the best choices for ourselves and for our communities that we can in those moments, as opposed to bringing destruction by maybe choosing foods that aren't so good for us when we're out eating, or even maybe catapulting ourselves into some kind of depression or something. So the song is just really about
quick question
us in the presence. Yes.
Should we stop the recording?
Yes.
And what is it? How long is the song about? 5 minutes?
It's about 5 minutes. And yeah, it's about 5 minutes and it's a gift. And yes, please stop the recording. I certainly don't, this is not, I'm not an entertainer at all. I would never do this to try to entertain anybody, but
Okay, great.
This is a prayer for all of us.
Beautiful. I just want to sort of start slowly here to let it just sort of vibrate through us here before I start to talk a little bit. And I think I'm going to start out by, again, just showing a few slides here. This, if you look at the right slide, so what we've talked about is really sort of the importance of what you might call deep remembering, right? Deep remembering our connections. And I just want to point to a few things that are maybe surprising. Some of you may recognize this. There's a photo there in the background, which are the voladores or eagle dancers that you can see if you go to Mexico City, for example. You can see it outside of the Anthropological Museum. You can see it on the Gulf Coast. The Totonac people, other people there are doing it, and it's really a calendrical count. Now, what you see in red and in black is a rock carving in Scandinavia that is at least 2,500 years old. Now, note there is a tapir there on the left, right, towards the bottom a little bit, and then sort of a painted in another tapir, right? But you see basically the same image of people coming down a tree of life, flying around, and it's a calendrical count. So that knowledge is there. Here on the right, just very briefly, this is a body painting that was done in ceremony. I worked, one of the, if any of you are pursuing these issues, one of the recommendations I would have is if you like reading novels, read Leslie Marmon Silko's novel, Ceremony, if you haven't already. It's a novel that deals with remembering who we are. And in this case, it's a mixed blood Pueblo boy who's been in the Second World War and the Bataan March, suffers from what we now call PTSD. But anyway, his healing happens by remembering who he is. And this is actually sort of a sculpture of the main healer in the novel, but it deals with my own remembrance. And I just want to highlight a moment when I, for the first time, and this happened in a native ceremony here in Northern California in a roundhouse, acknowledged my ancestry in a deep way. It wasn't just that there was something cognitive and mental happening. The only way I can describe this experience is it was like I had two rib cages, and these two rib cages came together and became one. And that's a little bit in there in the image of the raven. But then here is sort of a record of the work of recovering, connecting to Indigenous mind that I've been dealing with. You see on the left there, you see an ancient Macintosh, which is sort of covered with earth, right? It's my earth computer. And then, you see actually Sami language books because I was learning the Sami language. You see all kinds of things that were helpful for me in what I was doing. Here is an ancient rock carving, which I call the Woman of Memory. Here you see an image on top, you can see that this is kind of the same. This is a sculpture that I made based on that rock carving. And the Woman of Memory, the face is actually my Sami ancestor, from all I can tell. And what she's holding, what she's breathing in and out with are, in this case, images of Abu Ghraib, cleansing those images. Here you have an image of Thor. We have a story with this, with many rock carvings. We don't have a story, doing a blessing on a couple, a bonding ceremony. And here is a rock carving of a human in conversation. So this is a central image. I actually wrote a whole article about it, which I should probably put into the chat, and I will do that later. Where you have the tree of life, you have a guardian standing on top of the tree of life. You have three women. The three women are the woman of memory, the woman of becoming, and the woman of obligation of what we need to do in this life. And they are reaching into the well of memory. So this is a very profound cultural ancestral image for me. Oh yeah, there on the right, you see the web link. I can also, for this discussion of the well of memory, and I can put that into the chat also. And this is part of a project that I'm involved with these days. And we've talked about peace. Lisa talked about peace. Peace is so important. And indigenous studies, you know, the most biodiversity is on indigenous lands. So indigenous peoples are incredibly important for our future. So I want to, we have just enough time to do this, want to move into a little visualization. So this process of remembrance, of remembering our ancestry is, you know, is a complex process that has many different qualities. And we've touched, I think, upon all of them. So at the center is our storytelling self, right? We are storytellers. We tell our stories. So that's a natural mode. And storytelling is also an inquiry. It's part of self-reflection. So when we try to go through the recovery of connection with our indigenous roots, we have to address our ancestry. We have to address the place where we are, the history of that place. We have to reestablish our connection with nature. We have to look at the history, such as the history of, you know, how come I'm settled on this land? How did I get here? What happened here? We have to work with our connections, with our spirituality, our spiritual connections. Dreams are very important in indigenous thinking, stories, myth, ritual. Gender, many indigenous societies have different understandings of gender that aren't the you know, two categories that we commonly use, or at least used to. And community is, of course, important. And, you know, Lisa showed that beautiful photo of the community gathering there. So when we engage with these dimensions, then we can go through the process of recovering who we are in an indigenous sense. We can connect with place. We understand what balances us, what feeds us. You know, most of us probably, if, you know, I do this with students, I say, well, if I were to put you out into the wilderness 5 miles from here, could you survive? And of course, they all say I couldn't, because they don't know the plants. They don't know what is there. They don't know what to gather or what to hunt. So that intimate knowledge of place and exchanges with place, or, you know, in the Andes, they talk about nurturing conversation. We are here to nurture and to be nurtured. Criar y dejarse criar. You know, that cycle of being in the world, of being in balance, of being part of a web, of being part of a network. So many of us are hybrids, so I won't go over this, you know, in any detail. And it's really important to acknowledge hybridity. You know, peoples forever have moved, migrated, at times voluntarily, at times, you know, by force or through war. But there has always been a mixing and a moving of people, and it's really important to acknowledge that. Probably one of the worst ideas that the Western culture ever had was the idea of purity. We are all, mixed and in that sense, impure. So I think what I want to do, so that we have enough time here, I want to invite you to go through a little visualization with me, at least for a few generations. And I want to invite you to close your eyes and to make yourself comfortable. And as we go through this, if at any point, if you feel uncomfortable, you just open your eyes and, and that's that. There's no problem there. So I want you to develop an inner focus, maybe by attending to your breath, watching your breath coming and going, or in any other way in which you normally center and relax yourself. And as you exhale, let go of whatever it is that you don't want to be present to, allowing yourself to sink deeper into yourself. And I want you to go back in time into your childhood. Just take a moment with your eyes closed to remember what the world was like when you were a child. What were the clothes that you were wearing? Where were you? What were the smells? And also looking up at whoever it is that you grew up with, whether it's your biological parents, whether it's a grandparent, an auntie, whoever you grew up with, and see who they were and what they were doing at that time. And just take a moment to enter the world of your childhood, and then to see and connect the person or persons who raised you. So now I want you to make a switch, continuing with your eyes closed. I want you to look at the world through the eyes of the person who raised you, whether that's your parent, an aunt, grandparent, whoever it was, and see what was their world like at the time when you were a little one. And see what it was that they struggled with, that they had in their lives, the beauty, the challenges. What did they look like? What did they do for work? How did they spend their time? And just take a moment to reflect on that. And if photos come to mind, those are certainly helpful to for remembering. And now I want you to go further back in time and look at the childhood of this woman or man, whoever it was who raised you. What was their childhood like? Who were they when they were little? Where were they? Maybe you know what the clothes were wearing, or you can imagine it. What was their world like? And who did they grow up with? How were they raised? What was their world like? And now I want you in that position, look up at the people they grew up with who raised them, whoever that was, and see if you can enter the perspective, you might say the spirit of that person, and see the world through their eyes. What do you see? What was their world like? How did they live? Now I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to see if you can continue this process and go a little bit further back in time on your own. Remembering the person, entering the person, going back to their childhood, then switching to the person, the grandparent, the great-grandparent, the great aunt, whoever it was raising you, and then going back into their childhood, and then switching again. Just take a moment to move gently back into history. And now I want you to come back forward in time again toward the present. And as you do so, just go through the memories, the images that came up for you, and remember them. See if you can find a way to imprint them in yourself. And make sure that you do so before you open your eyes. Gently, slowly come back toward the present and bring with you the memories, the images of what you have experienced. And then whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes, maybe stretch a little bit, and come to full presence here, wherever it is that you are, in the place where you are. And so we have a little less than 20 minutes, but maybe we can just take 4 minutes, Don, to put everybody in a dyad, and everybody gets 2 minutes just to talk a little bit about what your experience was like, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. And don't share if you don't feel comfortable sharing. You know, this is just for you. And just an opportunity to check in how this was. And we're just taking 4 minutes all together here. So give each other 2 minutes. So just to cap it off for 1 minute here, this was a little bit rushed. Usually, I take a lot more time, both for the exercise itself, but also for processing and talking about it. And you can see how, how this can be very profound. And, we so often dismiss what we see in our inner movie theater. We dismiss it as fantasy. But if we go deep with our imagination, it can be really generative for our self-understanding and for our understanding of the world. And that's really when we go deep into this work. It connects us in a way that holds truths that are important. So it's an important avenue, and this kind of imagination is sort of akin to dreams, you know, and I'm sure Lisa, if she had the time, she could talk a lot about, you know, visions and, you know, and those and the connection, because those are all sort of related states that get us into both a deeper sense of self, but really also beyond our self. You know, it's sort of deep in the self and beyond the self into our interconnectedness. So thank you. And yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's amazing, and why it's so important to do this work, you know, to have spaces to do deeper work like this, where you have time to really dive in and process afterwards. So we're going to be hosting a workshop in November, I think I mentioned, with Jürgen and his colleague, who do this kind of work, reconnecting with your ancestors. Yeah, so we have 10 minutes left, and or 8 minutes now, and I want to just sort of see what closing thoughts are about this. It seems, you know, going back over everything that was spoken about by Lisa and by Jürgen, that awakening to our indigeneity and decolonizing ourselves is really kind of reconnecting to our inner, not only our own roots and our lineage, but it's also decolonizing our linear way of thinking and being. And so we're coming back to this kind of more circular, spirally kind of way of being that's part of life, and um, less structured and hierarchical, as Lisa was talking about. So it's more natural. It's more based on the natural way, the way nature works. So decolonizing is reconnecting to the way the natural systems work. So that's my understanding, and that's kind of my reiteration of what you both have been speaking about. So now I'd love to hear your kind of, you know, summary, if you will, um, or any last thoughts that you have about this important this important work, you know, that a lot of people are being drawn and called to do, for themselves. So Lisa, would you like to go first, and then Jürgen? Are you there?
Okay, thank you, Jules. Thank you for inviting me here, and thank every one of you for being here, you know, because we're all in this together. And so if you're tuning into these dialogues, I kind of feel like you're already on the same page. And, you know, these conversations are just really critical. And I mean, I would want to leave everybody with the idea that we're in a great shift. You know, the Rainbow Tribe has come together. The Lakota prophecies talked about this time period. The Mayan calendar talked about this. The Aztec calendar talked about this. You know, we're at a time of great change right now. And so I would want all of us to not underestimate the power of our coming together as a collective, in believing and knowing that we really can make a difference through our voices, through our presence, through getting involved with the things that are going on in our local areas, you know, through standing in solidarity. And the biggest mandate within that is to take care of yourself from the inside out. It's, you know, I feel like that whole self-healing piece, you know, whether we're seeking outside assistance to break up some of that heavy energy, but please beware of the pharmaceuticals and all of those things. I probably don't have to repeat this to everybody, but the natural medicines, as much as possible, make the changes that we need to make in our diets, and spend some time with a quiet mind. You know, our scientific research shows, and ancient practices for thousands and thousands of years, are about stilling our mind. And when we still our mind, we step deeper into our own sense of self. So I just would encourage everybody. I mean, I even encourage myself, get out more, do more walking, make sure that I'm out there as much as possible. And there are parts of my life during the season where I get to live in nature. And I'm just, like I even live in the walls of a mud house and really feel like I'm in the womb of Mother Earth, and the ceremonies that we do and all of those things, so take some opportunity to sit on the dirt in the earth, stare up at the stars, go in the sun, greet the sun, get those electrons, those ions coming in and out, and recognize that you're important and you're a part of a whole. We're all in this together. And when we can create a collective consciousness of stewardship and move in solidarity, that's the opportunity that we have today. Standing Rock showed me that, and Mauna Kea and some of these other things. When I see people from all over the world, from all nationalities and from all socioeconomic groups coming together to stand as one. I mean, Jewel and I partnered out of this. It's like, here she comes into the teepee at Standing Rock. She has a seminary degree. And, I'm like, wait a minute, what is Christian stuff here? You're at a teepee. And whatever it was that I projected for that moment, I sure did check myself. And I'm grateful for that, and open my heart and get over myself. And like, man, we're all in this together. And so I just, Jewel, I just really appreciate you and the work that you're doing. So thank you. Like our prayers together, when we pray together and we stand together, we are strong. And so I just want to continue to encourage that there's nothing that's too small in this movement to become aware of our highest expression and ourself as stewards of the earth. So mianga wa mibi'i, meet lau dielo. Aho.
Ah, wow. Thank you so much, Lisa. And Jürgen, do you have any last words? I mean, I'm just really letting that soak into my heart, Lisa. Thank you.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you, well spoken. There's a little to add to that. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody who made this happen, Jewel and Dawn and Lisa. It's so wonderful that we had the opportunity here for this dialogue here. And I want to say, I mean, for me, the most important thing is there is hope, right? I mean, we're in dire times and there is hope. And, years ago, I felt like a lost soul, which to me is what white consciousness is, right? But going down these trails really healed that. And I was no longer lost. And that's where the hope is. Because all these practices, all these aspects that have been mentioned, they're so healing, they're nurturing. And, in many ways, they're not dramatic. They are natural. They're who we are naturally. And I think that's really important to remember, and I'm so glad that we have technology that can help us in that, right? Which is sort of a weird paradox, right? But here we are, this technology, this is actually a use of technology that helps us and sort of kicks us into this realm of remembering who we truly are and who we can be. And we each have a gift. We each have a gift that we can use to make a difference in the world. And it's different for everybody. We don't all need to do one thing or that other one thing. We need to figure out, well, what's the best thing that I can give away? Like for me, a lot of it revolves around teaching, and if I'm true to that, I can make a difference in certain arenas, and for somebody else, it's something else. And if we all do that, and if we are true to that, and then, change is happening, and change is happening in so many places. So I want to thank you all for being here, being engaged in these dialogues, because, they are urgent. They're very urgent. So thank you. I'm grateful for this event and everybody here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jürgen. And thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much for your presence and your work in the world. And thank you, Dawn, for helping hold the space, and to all of the team that's been holding this whole summit, which has been talking about decolonizing. And actually, I will actually as, propose or suggest that transition itself is a decolonizing movement, even though we haven't called it that, and not all the dots have been connected. It's not been explicit, but anything that returns us to the land, returns us to each other, helps to reconnect us to our local resources and our natural gifts, is a decolonizing um, is a decolonizing effort. so we're just connecting more dots with Indigenous leadership, and supporting our own reconnection to our roots. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for this for your kind attention to the work. And we'll see you in the next session, wherever that is. And please do sign up for the Inner Resilience Network. We will be hosting these kinds of talks in the future. As I mentioned, there's one in November. There's also a retreat in November where you can in-person retreat, which is a Wild Mind Animas Valley Institute training. So check that out on the innerresilience.net. And once again, thank you all. Many, many blessings.